debt comes to an end by me. Hi, classmates that I know are watching this. This is very unedited. I cannot be bothered to, bro. So I'm gonna get onto the story. It's like 2,000 words, 2,800 words long, so I'm just gonna get onto it now. They had a debt to pay, they reminded themselves as they looked up at the tower. It was made of gray, overgrown stones. More green than gray at this point. It was a terrible idea. They might have been dumb, but they were not naive. They were going to die in there, but the only other option was dying out here. And they'd rather give whatever was in there the satisfaction of killing them than the bastard that was making them do this in the first place. They were going to die either way. Why not die to the unknown and not their master? They took in a deep breath and walked up to the doorway. There was no door there, which meant the thing could escape whenever it wanted to. Maybe it did, no one had seen it. That didn't matter because they were about to enter its den, and they wouldn't come out alive. Maybe, they thought for a tiny minute, they could just leave, run away, change their name. They rubbed a hand on their neck, where the collar was when their master chose to summon it, where the chains were. There was no escape from a magical being, which was the closest thing they could call what their master was. The only escape was death, and that was where they were going. They walked inside the tower, and the air shifted. There was something dangerous in the air. They had experience with these beings. Their master was one of these beings. Not one like this. Their master was no near as powerful as this monster, they were being honest. Their master had limits. This thing seemed to not, if the rumors were true. Raquel looked around. The vines were consuming the place, it seemed. They wondered how the thing felt. They didn't think the thing had limits, if, well, the rumors were true. So if it didn't want the vines, then the vines would not be here, meaning it either enjoyed them or simply did not care enough about the land around it to get rid of them. The place was decayed. Their mission was to look around the tower, see if there was anything useful, and then bring that back to their master. If there wasn't, then they flinched at the thought. They would lose something of theirs if they didn't die, which they were going to. An eye, maybe. Not both of them, they wouldn't be able to see. And then what use would they be there for their master? An arm, maybe. I don't get many guests, a voice said from nowhere and everywhere at once. Especially not leashed ones. They flinched. Of course, a being much more powerful than their master would be able to sense it on them. They probably reeked of magical energy. Not like they could check. Their magic sense was gone. It had been removed. The claw was reaching for them. It was going to kill them. They were going to die. They were going to die. They resisted the urge to shake their head. It wasn't real. It was real, but in the past. A distant past. 20 years to the dot, they realized. The calendar that had been their wall was burnt into their brain. Perks of them staring at it during the worst day of their life. Well, they looked around. Soon, it was going to be the second worst day of their life. The first on the list would be their last day. They never said goodbye to their master, they realized. They didn't know how they felt about that. They should feel good about it, really, after everything the being had done to them. It was the reason that they were going to die. But they didn't. They just felt hollow where their heart was meant to be. Their master had ripped that out with their magic. I know your owner, the thing said. And the way it said it made it sound like it wasn't a pleasant relationship, which made sense. If it was, they wouldn't need to be here. I don't know why they thought they were allowed to send someone into my tower, it hissed. They flinched at the harsh tone, taking a step back. I'm not mad at you, the thing said, and that was the first. Every time they came somewhere on behalf of their master, the beings there who had the same rules, even though this thing didn't, always acted like they were the reason for their anger. Like they were willingly choosing to be here. I'm not stupid. A mortal would never willingly work for them. And while you are not a regular mortal, you are still treated the same by them. Not a regular mortal. It had to be talking about their magic. Humans weren't meant to be able to sense it. Weren't meant to be able to cast it or touch it. But how did it know that? They couldn't use magic anymore. Couldn't even sense it. They were, from what they knew, a magicless being now. No trace of magic was there. How do you know that? They asked. The thing was going to kill them no matter what they did, so they might as well at least have a slight chance to get answers. Magic has a smell. You mortals can't smell it. Neither can your owner. But I can, the voice explained. Oh, that made sense. It had been 20 years, and the smell was still there? They guessed it never left, even if you only casted one spell. Not like they'd only casted one spell, they'd casted dozens. It is what got them in their master's eyes in the first place. They were talented once upon a time. Yours is a very interesting smell. A lingering one. I guess having a core part of you ripped out does that to a mortal? I wouldn't know. I've never ripped out a magical core. It hadn't? Their master said that them ripping out was simply what beings like them did to unique humans. Unique beings who weren't meant to have magic. And well, this thing was not like their master, was not of the same species, was different in a way that nothing else they'd met had been different. So maybe their master had been right, and that this thing was simply unique. Humans aren't meant to have magic cores, so I wonder how you got one. And then suddenly they were staring at the thing. It was bigger than their master, who was already 12 feet, so it was around 15 feet. It had more teeth, too, rows upon rows of them. They took another step back. No, don't run away, you're interesting. It laughed, coiling its head, and I'll find you. They stopped dead in their tracks, maybe because it reminded them of their master, or maybe they remembered the fact that it could simply follow them out if they decided to run for it. Let me get a good look at you, the thing said, smiling. It stared at them for a solid minute before its eyes widened. Oh, that makes sense. What makes sense? They asked before they could stop themselves. Their big mouths. You are not fully... Oh no. Ignore that, y'all. It didn't happen. You are not fully human, it said. They blinked. What? I can see it on you. Somewhere in your family tree, as you mortals put it, someone met a being and had a child with it. The blood is faint now, but it's still there. You're telling me, what, Grandpa or something wasn't a person? That is what I'm saying. You are not fully mortal, and it paused. I think you have potential. They threw their hands up in the air. What does that mean? They asked, not even caring how loud they were being. I mean, the thing stopped, and suddenly a weight was removed from them. The weight of control. That you are my trainee now. Wait, they realized. They grabbed their neck, and it felt like there wasn't a paranormal chain on them. Were they free now? I'm free, they asked. They hadn't felt freedom in 20 years. Yes, for a price. What price, they asked. There weren't many things they weren't willing to do to get back their freedom. You have potential, and I would like to train you to use it. And what does that entail? They asked, raising an eyebrow. Lawyers would love them, because they actually ask questions before signing contracts. You stay here for a little while, and I teach you what you need to survive, and maybe get a little revenge on that former master of yours. They stared at it. And everyone they knew was gone. And, well, maybe they weren't, but it wasn't like that mattered. It had been 20 years. They were too changed, and the thought of being able to see the fear in their master's eyes when Raquel had the power over them. I will, Raquel agreed, nodding. They wanted to get their revenge, something they had always wanted, but never thought they would have a chance to do. They looked down at their hands, then back up at the thing. When do we start? They asked. Eyes narrowed. At any point you want. I want now, they hissed. And the thing chuckled. I understand, it said. I have felt that rage too. The thing introduced itself as Abyss, one of the oldest beings in the universe. Are you older than them? They asked. They didn't say the name of their master. They refused it. Names were powers, and that was why Abyss had introduced themselves as such. It was not their real name. They would never know the real name of the thing. They didn't need to. They wanted to, but they sighed as they put down the cup. They didn't need to know it, and if it wasn't needed, then they wouldn't ask. Abyss confirmed they were, in fact, older than their master, and that made them feel something. That was something they had learned. No questions that weren't for training. Special mortal! Names were power, and Abyss was not going to have any power over them. Well, they looked down at the floor. Any more power than staying in their domain gave them. What are you drinking? Hot chocolate, they replied. They weren't allowed to drink it under their master. Too much happiness, they were sure. Not like they could remember the reason. They looked at Abyss. What about no questions besides training? That's a rule for you, not me, it explained. Why? They asked. That didn't seem fair. I don't want to answer questions, it replied as it sat down next to them. At least it was honest. If they had asked their master, former master, they corrected themselves, they would have given them another non-answer, just said that they were better than them, so they got to ask questions, and mortals didn't. Raquel was glad they were no longer with their master. And, Abyss said, I find you interesting. I know myself. I don't know you. Abyss knew more about them than most people alive did. Not like Abyss counted as a person. Most people didn't know beings like them existed. Well, I'm not sure if you know what hot chocolate is. Beings like Abyss and their master. Well, Abyss was in a different category than their master, but they didn't know what the different things, the species were called. They hadn't gotten to that lesson, but they hoped they would soon. They assumed it was going to be one of the first lessons. They wondered what species their ancestor was, and if their ancestor was still around. They didn't even know if beings like this could be killed, really. I'm unaware. I do not interact with mortals often. Hot chocolate is a good drink. Well, it's sweet. It's not for health. It's actually bad for mortals, but it tastes good, so it's fine, they said while smiling. You mortals are so interesting, Abyss said as it got closer to them. Is hot chocolate a unique drink? Do you mortals have other drinks that are bad for you, but you drink for the taste anyway? They nodded. It's a thing, and most things that mortals drink are bad for them, but the things that aren't cost too much. Ah, money. Paper that you mortals decided had value. Yep, they said, popping the pea. I don't know why we did that. We've slaughtered thousands of trees to make paper. Humans have a habit of that, it said, hurting others because you've assigned values to things that don't matter. Did beings like you not do that? They asked, curious. That was their master's main thing. I'm better than everyone, so I'm allowed to hurt other people. Not relevant to training, Abyss reminded them. It paused, and then it said, there are not many beings like me. Similar, but like me? I can name 2 that I'm aware of. They blinked. Only 2? They asked. Yes, I am aware breed. It laughed and then looked them in their eyes. I am like you in that way. What am I? They asked. I'm not fully like them, or you, but I'm not fully human, so what does that make me? Your kind does not have a name, Abyss said. I believe you should make a name. It paused. When you learn the language of your people, and it was silent for another moment, when you learn the language of mine. Their eyes widened. You're going to teach me your language? Yes, you are my trainee. You need to know how to communicate in a way that no one may understand besides us. And the 2 other people, probably. Well, beings that weren't people. But they weren't going to ask about those. It was not relevant to training. Okay, they said. That made them feel a certain way. A mix of happiness, relief, surprise. It had been a year when their master appeared. Well, their former master. They had simply been talking to Abyss at the entrance of the tower. It always sent them off when they went to go get stuff, and from what they could tell, it stood at the front door until they came back. They wanted to ask, but there was the rule about no questions besides training. Not like that rule was in force, both of them pretended it was. Mostly to not address the fact that they were getting close. That they weren't just a trainer and their trainee anymore. And Abyss really used it as a way to dodge questions that they didn't want to answer. "I'll be back in 3 hours," they said. Abyss nodded. Yes, 3 hours. Exactly 3 hours. "I can't promise that, but it won't be a significant time difference from what I say." "What is considered a significant time difference?" They shrugged. 30 minutes. I won't be 30 minutes late," they confirmed. They can't guarantee that, and wish they hadn't said it the moment they did. What if they couldn't? What if they break that? They looked at Abyss. They didn't hurt them the entire time they were here. It wouldn't hurt them for this, they hoped. "Okay," Abyss said, extending the Y. "Please be safe." They turned and walked out, and outside the tower was them, their former master. They were just as intimidating as they remembered them. Maybe after a year it should have gone away, but it hadn't. They were still just as intimidating. Their former master was not as tall as Abyss, but that seemed to do nothing for the panic in their stomach. They turned around and ran back into the tower. Abyss was still there, its eyes widened. "Why do you look so panicked?" it asked. "My master is out there," they said, choking on their words. "Your former master is out there," it corrected, and yeah, they were okay. Their master was not their master anymore. They had no power over them anymore. "I'm going out there," Abyss said. They flinched. No. What if Abyss got hurt? For them. "Special mortal," Abyss said, getting closer to them. They wanted to be calm. They wanted to be safe. They opened their arms and wrapped them around Abyss before they could think. Safe. "What is this?" Abyss said. They hadn't explained hugs to Abyss. It hadn't come up. They wished they had done that before this. "Hug," they managed to choke out, feeling their throat burn. "Is that a good thing?" They nodded. "Okay, as I was saying, I am more powerful than your former master. I can get them away from this place easily." No, don't leave," they begged, clinging on tighter. Abyss was silent for a moment before it said, "I won't. If you don't wish for me to leave, then I will stay." Abyss got rid of their former master after they calmed down. Raquel didn't know if it killed them, if beings like them could be killed, or if it just shooed them away. They didn't ask. They wanted to forget about the whole thing. Their training was over. They still had a lot to learn, but they could go out into the world as not fully immortal, not a full whatever Abyss and their former master was. "So, it's time, isn't it?" they said as they stood in the front of the door. They didn't want to leave. They didn't have anywhere else to go, but Abyss wasn't going to let them stay. It had been their deal. They trained, and then they could go free. "It is, I believe," Abyss said. They stared at it a moment before they turned. "Goodbye, I guess. I had a nice time staying with you." They were halfway out the door when Abyss yelled, "Wait!" They flinched and turned to it. It stared at them for a second before it spoke in the most panicked tone they had heard it. "You don't have to leave. If you wish to, you can. But if you want to stay, I'm not sure where you'll go if you don't. Then you can stay here, if that's what you wish." Raquel felt relief take over them. They could stay. They didn't have to leave into a world they couldn't understand anymore. A world that would never understand them. They ran towards Abyss and wrapped their arms around it. "Thank you," they said. "You're welcome, special mortal." They looked at it. If they were gonna be living together for the rest of their life, then they should probably know their real name. "Raquel," they said. "My name is Raquel."